everyone. My name is Casie Stevens, and I'm the Director of Trust Services at Midwest Special Needs Trust. And we have Heather Cooper with us, and she's our Charitable Trust Specialist at Midwest Special Needs Trust. Thank you for joining us on this virtual Real Voices, Real Choices presentation day. Today, we're going to be talking about what's in it for me. So empowering your finances, preserving your benefits. We're going to be looking at options available to individuals with disabilities on saving their funds, and then also looking at our charitable grant program. So we're just going to get started here real quick. Today we are going to talk about financial options available to persons with disabilities. So special needs trust primarily. So first party trust, third party trust, and pooled trust. We're also going to mention the ABLE accounts, and we're going to compare a little bit which one might be better. Our charitable grant program, Heather is going to talk about, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. We are just going to jump in and get started here this morning. Special needs trust basics are, what are they? They are established for the sole benefit of the person with the disability, meaning the trust cannot be used for anybody else, just the person with a disability. They are a financial planning tool for individuals, families, and friends. So savings, you can save your funds. Family members can plan for their loved ones and still protect the public benefits of the individual. Utilized for supplemental needs and not basic support. What that means is I can't pay for housing and food, right? But they can pay for all of the other needs, and we'll go over what that list looks like. Governed by trust language and applicable statutes. That means that there is a trust document, a written legal document, and then all of that is governed by the law, both federally and state. Attorneys, banks, and pooled trust organizations are all options for special needs trust administration, and they are considered an exempt asset for supplemental security income, so your SSI, Medicaid, food stamps, and HUD housing. This is the reason for special needs trust. So individuals who have a special needs trust, they maintain their eligibility for those programs because the funds are not considered theirs. I'm going to jump to the next slide. So first party trusts are trusts established by the parent, grandparent, guardian, court, or the individual with a disability who is under the age of 65. They are funded with the beneficiary's assets. And what that means is it is the person's own money. Those funds come from Social Security back pay, personal injury settlements, conserved funds, and conserved funds mean you have funds sitting in the bank and now you need to qualify for Medicaid or SSI. You can put those funds into a special needs trust. Unplanned inheritances can also fund a first party trust. They are irrevocable, which means you can't make any changes and you can't close it because you got mad at the trustee. They cannot be changed and they cannot be closed. And then there is a Medicaid payback requirement at the end of the trust. So Medicaid says you can have these funds during your lifetime. They are available for your supplemental needs, but at the end of the trust, they want paid back for the services they provided during your lifetime. And Heather is going to lead us into some questions here, some discussions, scenarios for discussion. We're going to find out if first party trust is the best option for these folks.
Yeah, so we're going to go through some scenarios and then think about the information we just learned from Casie and if this would be a first party trust. So our first scenario is Kelly, who's 9 months old, and she has a physical disability. She receives a personal injury settlement in the amount of $100,000. So in Kelly's case, would a first party trust be appropriate?
And if we answered yes, then you are on the right path. These funds are Kelly's, so a first party trust would be appropriate.
So our next scenario is Joseph, who's 12, and he has a developmental disability. He receives an unplanned inheritance from his grandmother. And in Joseph's case, would a first party trust be appropriate?
If you answered yes, then you're still on the right track and you're very good listeners. Since these funds are from an unplanned inheritance, Joseph's grandma didn't put them into a special needs trust. They would be first party funds because they are considered his. Even though Joseph is a minor, they are still considered his funds.
So our next scenario is Susie, who's 36, and she was diagnosed with a disabling mental illness. She receives a supplemental security income back payment of $16,000. She's also a recipient of Medicaid. Would a first-party trust be appropriate for Susie?
So our answer is yes. And since the funds are from a Social Security back pay, a first-party trust would be appropriate. One more.
Our last scenario for this section is Kyle, who's 58, and he is living with a developmental disability. His parents planned for his inheritance to go directly to a special needs trust. In Kyle's case, would a first-party trust be appropriate?
Oh, tricked you. So no, a first-party trust would not be appropriate in Kyle's scenario because Kyle's family is planning for his inheritance. They're planning ahead, and this would be considered what's called a third-party trust. But first, we're going to meet my dad. I forgot about my slide. So Charlie is my dad, who was physically disabled when he was 50 years old. He had other disabilities, including struggles with addiction and mental health issues, and he's unable to work. He also received a large personal injury settlement. His diagnosis include congestive heart failure, pulmonary fibrosis, and bipolar. Charlie, with his personal injury settlement, was eligible to open a first-party special needs trust. So he put those funds from his personal injury settlement into a first-party trust, and he was able to maintain his public benefits. The special needs trust provided my dad the opportunity to remain on public benefits while having funds available to him for his supplemental need. My dad has since passed. He's been gone for 12 years now, and his special needs trust paid back Medicaid. So Medicaid said, Charlie, you had these funds available to you during your lifetime or this short time with your personal injury funds, and so we are going to need you to pay us back since the trust is closing due to death for the services we provided. It was important for my dad to remain on his public benefits, and so it was important for him to have a special needs trust, and that's something that we always advocate for, is you want to maintain those public benefits, and this PowerPoint, this presentation today, provides you with some options, like a first-party special needs trust. So a few slides ago, we met Kyle, and Kyle's parents were planning to give him an inheritance through a special needs trust, and that's considered a third-party trust. Third-party trusts are donor funds. They are somebody's funds other than the person with the disability. Typical sources include their own personal funds. They have money in a bank account, and they want to give some to their loved one. Life insurance policies can go into a special needs trust, as well as wills and estates. They can be revocable or irrevocable. When the donor passes away, they do become irrevocable. And upon the beneficiary's death, all assets are distributed per the donor's wishes, meaning the donor can leave funds to whomever they want to after the death of the life beneficiary, and there's no Medicaid payback. Medicaid determined that these funds were not the individual with a disability, so they don't have to pay back Medicaid for the services they provided. This is a third-party trust, which again is very different than a first party. So we learned about first party, which is the beneficiary's own funds, and now we have third party, which is somebody other than the beneficiary. And we're going to go through some scenarios that Heather's going to read us through.
Yeah, so our first scenario in this section, thinking specifically on what Casie just talked about regarding third-party trusts. Heath is 3 months old with a seizure disorder. His grandparents want to fund a trust for him with their life insurance policy. Would a third-party trust be appropriate for Heath?
And our answer is yes.
Great.
Yep. Since the funds are Heath's grandparents, a third-party trust would be appropriate. So they are pre-planning, right? They want to save for Heath.
All right, our next scenario is Xavier, who is 5, and he has a disability. His family has decided to save money for him, each contributing up to $5,000. Would a third-party trust be appropriate for Xavier?
Yes. So you guys are doing great. If you've answered yes, you're right on track. These funds would be considered his family's funds, so a third-party trust would be appropriate in this scenario.
Oh, our next lady is Connie, who's 45, and she has a mental illness. Connie's mother left her an $80,000 inheritance. The will directed those funds to go directly to a special needs trust. Would a third-party trust be appropriate for Connie?
And our answer is still yes. because Connie's mom is pre-planning. She's planned ahead and provided special direction in her will as where the fund should go. And that is to the third-party special needs trust for Connie. One more scenario here.
And we have Sandy, who's 60 and has a physical disability. She receives an unplanned inheritance of $14,000. Would a third-party trust be appropriate for Sandy?
And our answer here is no. And that is because they are unplanned. The option that Sandy does have is a first-party trust, right? Because in our previous scenarios, the families had all planned for their loved ones. In this scenario, Sandy's mom didn't plan, or Sandy's parents didn't plan, and so it is a first-party trust. So we've talked about first-party trust, which is the beneficiary's own funds. We've talked about third-party trust, and that being somebody else's funds for the individual with a disability. And now we have a third kind of special needs trust, and that's called a pooled trust. A pooled trust is established by a nonprofit organization with the individual beneficiaries creating larger accounts within the trust. Essentially what that means is that the funds are pooled together for investment and management purposes. This provides a low-cost option. First-party trust must be established by the parent, grandparent, guardian, the court, or the individual of any age. And while I have an asterisk there, that means because there's no age limit when you go to a pooled trust organization. If somebody is over the age of 65, I always tell them to call me because there are some rules with Medicaid that we have to follow. But federally, anybody of any age can open a first-party trust with a pooled trust organization. And remainder funds are used to help others with disabilities. So not only is there the required Medicaid payback provision for the first-party trust, but also the pooled trust retains funds for their charitable mission. Our charitable mission we're going to learn about here in just a little bit, but it is our MSNT charitable grant program. That's why we retain our funds to help support others. So we're going to talk some scenarios through about pooled trust. So we have first-party trust, which is the individual's own money. We have third-party trust, which is the donor's funds for a loved one with a disability. And we have a pooled trust, which is special needs trust run by a pooled trust organization run by a nonprofit. Midwest Special Needs Trust is a nonprofit. We do both first party and third party. And again, the pooled trust is a low cost option and typically take lower amounts of funds than a bank or an attorney would.
All right, so we have a few more scenarios to go through, just thinking specifically about what Casie talked to us about pooled trusts. So Jacob is one. He has a personal injury settlement of nearly $200,000. His family goes to a bank to set up a special needs trust. The bank doesn't accept the trust because the trust assets don't meet their minimum balance. So would a pooled trust be appropriate for Jacob's family?
And the answer is yes. Pooled trusts have very low minimum balances, so a pooled trust would be appropriate for Jacob. Most banks aren't going to administer special needs trust unless it's over $500,000 and in some cases $1 million. So a pooled trust is a more appropriate option in a lot of circumstances. First party trust, right? Because those are his funds from a personal injury settlement.
Anne is 22 and she has a mental illness. She receives an unplanned inheritance of $95,000. The attorney administering the will tells Anne she needs a special needs trust. He does not have the staff to provide the correct oversight for this type of trust. So would a pooled trust be appropriate in Anne's case?
So we have Anne, she has an unplanned inheritance and she needs a special needs trust. We know that, right? So a pooled trust would be appropriate in this circumstance and it would be considered a first party trust. These are her funds from an unplanned inheritance. So first party trust is most appropriate.
Our next scenario is Regina, who's 60, and she receives a small life insurance policy from her husband. She has not been deemed disabled by Social Security and is not receiving any public benefits. Would a pooled trust be appropriate in Regina's case?
So what are our keywords there? She has not been deemed disabled by Social Security and isn't receiving any public benefits. Would a pooled trust be appropriate? No. A pooled trust wouldn't be appropriate for Regina. She doesn't need one, right? So she's not on any One, she hasn't been determined disabled, and two, she doesn't need to protect her public benefits because she doesn't have any. Sometimes I get phone calls like this where people are trying to figure out what's best for their family or themselves, and sometimes I have to tell them, no, I'm not the best option, right? Because you're not receiving what we're trying to protect.
And our last scenario in this case is Margaret, who's 70, and she's living in a skilled facility. She's the beneficiary on her husband's retirement account. She needs to remain eligible for Medicaid. Would a pool trust be appropriate in Margaret's case?
In Miss Margaret's case, maybe is our answer. Depending on her state's Medicaid rules, she should talk to Medicaid in the pool trust organization. Like I said, if you're over the age of 65, the federal law says you can have a special needs trust, a pooled special needs trust, but Medicaid has come back and put some rules on that. So if that is a circumstance that you would like to talk about, I would be happy to do so. So we said at the beginning that special needs trusts can pay for supplemental needs and not basic support. Basic support includes housing, utilities, food, and cash to the life beneficiary. Those are the things I cannot pay for. Allowable distributions, on the other hand, there's so many. Medical, dental, services not provided by other entities, rehab, trainings, physical therapy, education, transportation, travel expenses, able accounts, phone, cable, and internet. All of those things are allowable. Oh, I did not mean to switch my slide. There we go. I do want to stop for a second and let's take note of what I can pay for here. So I can pay for an irrevocable prepaid burial policy. I highly recommend the purchase of an irrevocable prepaid burial policy because a special needs trust cannot pay for the funeral after the death of the life beneficiary. It is incredibly important that these are paid for ahead of time, because I have the conversation with families on a regular basis that I cannot pay for the funeral of their loved ones with the special needs trust fund because the beneficiaries passed away. So please take note of the things we can pay for, and we're going to compare that to the things that the ABLE account can pay for. There is some differences, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about those. Note that a special needs trust can fund an ABLE account. So the ABLE account stands for, I'm going to switch gears, I'm going to pause for just a second, let everybody take a big deep breath before we talk about the ABLE account. This is a nice stopping point for just a second. And so I am sure lots of you in this room have heard of ABLE accounts. It is the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving a Better Life Experience Act of 2014. They've been around for a long time. Lots of people have used them, and they are a fantastic tool for individuals with disabilities. What is the ABLE account all about, right? So it's available as a financial planning tool for persons with disabilities and their families. I said that earlier about a special needs trust, right? So both tools are available, similar to a college 529 savings plan. When I say similar, I mean almost copy and paste. Pretty identical to the college plan. It provides autonomy and independence for individuals. No one is really watching what you're spending out of the ABLE account. There are rules on what you should spend, and you should always keep your receipts, but no one is telling you no. Individuals must be considered disabled before the age of 26. So we heard over when I was talking about the special needs trust that there is age limits on when you can fund it, and that age limit might be 65. But with a special need, with an ABLE account, you must be considered disabled before the age of 26. You can have one account per person. That means mom and dad and individual all have to give or fund the same ABLE account. Excuse me. Up to $16,000 in deposits per year. There's no cap on a special needs trust. There is a cap per year on the ABLE account. There is a required Medicaid payback provision, which I think that the ABLE account does a great job of talking about now, but I don't know that they always have. So at the end of the ABLE account, Medicaid is paid back for the services they provided during the lifetime of the ABLE account. So from the time the ABLE account opened to the time it closed, Medicaid can take a claim on that amount. If you want more information on the ABLE account, moable.com is the best place to go. We talked about distributions from a special needs trust and what those look like. Let's talk about qualified disability expenses from an ABLE account. So assistive technology and personal support, education, health and wellness, transportation, employment training and support, all of those things are allowable. Anything that has to do with the individual's disability is an allowable expense from the ABLE account. You'll note on here, so I always like to point out a couple of things. One, housing. ABLE accounts can pay for housing expenses. You said, hey, Casie, you said a special needs trust can't. An ABLE account can, and a special needs trust can fund an ABLE account. So there are some ways that you can utilize both a special needs trust and an ABLE account and have all of your needs met. So housing is allowable, as well as expenses, including funeral expenses after death. Just told you about the importance of an irrevocable prepaid burial policy. If you have an ABLE account, you can pay for the funeral costs after the death of the beneficiary of the ABLE account. It's important to know which can pay for which. But yes, a funeral is an allowable expense after the death. And what I say with qualified disability expenses, if it is for the benefit of the individual, then it is likely a qualified disability expense. I don't think this list is exhaustive. And in fact, I think they've updated it over the years to include more items. So, but the main difference being housing and funeral expenses compared to a special needs trust.
We're going to go over some scenarios, thinking specifically about the ABLE accounts. Janie is 6 months old. She was born with a developmental disability. Her grandparents want to save money for her future needs and plan to give her $10,000 a year. Is an ABLE account appropriate for Janie and her family?
The answer is yes, absolutely. The yearly amount the grandparents plan to save is under 15 or 16 now, and an ABLE account would be appropriate.
So next is Thomas, who's 8, and he had a traumatic brain injury from a personal injury. He receives nearly $12,000 from his personal injury settlement. His family is planning on utilizing the funds for qualified disability expenses. Is an ABLE account appropriate for Thomas?
We're going to say yes, it is. Thomas will receive is under the yearly amount and used for qualified disability expenses. An ABLE account would be appropriate.
So our next scenario is Joan, who's 30. She was disabled before the age of 26. She receives an unclaimed inheritance of $8,000. Is an ABLE account appropriate for Joan?
The answer is yes. So she not only met the age requirement for being considered disabled, but the funds are under the yearly amount, and so an ABLE account would be appropriate for Joan.
And then our last scenario in this section is Michael, who's 55. He suffers a heart attack and is no longer able to work. Social Security does determine he has a disability, and he starts receiving SSDI. He receives a small back payment that will put him over the asset test for Medicaid. To ensure he remains eligible for Medicaid, he would like to open an ABLE account. Is an ABLE account appropriate for Michael?
So our answer here is no, and the main reason is because Michael was not determined disabled until after the age of 26. What may be appropriate is a first party trust, right? That's where he could put his funds, but he's too old for an ABLE account at 55. So a little bit about us. Midwest Special Needs Trust is a nonprofit pool trust organization established by state statute in 1989. We have staff and board members that have family members who have disabilities, and we serve Missouri and all of the surrounding states. We receive no state or federal appropriations. That means we're self-funded. No one is giving us funds to continue our operations. Everything is self-funded within our organization. We're managed by professionals who are familiar with public funding and state and federal laws and regulations. And I'm going to read this sentence really slow because I think it's a beautiful sentence. Our experiences and dedication to our families allow us to understand, relate to, and make policy decisions that are best not only for our loved ones, but the beneficiaries we serve. we are here, the staff is here, this board is here to serve individuals and their families. It is the reason that we come to work every day, and we all love what we do. So we are dedicated to MSNT and dedicated to serving the people that we serve. And sometimes when you're looking for trustees or talking to banks, they may not have that kind of mission statement. They may not be in it for their beneficiaries, right? So this is important for us to remember that pool trust organizations are out there as an option, and that they are doing it because they love what they do. Heather is going to jump in and talk about our charitable grant program.
Yeah, we're going to switch gears a little bit. So even though we are called Midwest Special Needs Trust, we do have two very different programs that we have here. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our charitable program. So like Casie mentioned before, it is administered by Midwest Special Needs Trust. We provide grants up to $2,000 for items or services that are otherwise not covered by insurance or public benefits. So if it's a need that your insurance should cover, then we expect for your insurance to cover it, but maybe there's a part of maybe some dental care that your Medicare or Medicaid doesn't cover. You know, we might be able to help with that portion of it. We can assist with a wide variety of things. The items that Special Needs Trust can't help with, housing expenses, utilities, things like that are the same for our charitable program. Those are not things that we can help with. Other than that, there's a wide range of things that people request from us, and we'll have a list here in a little bit. We can go over those. So we do have two types of grants. We have urgent requests. Those are all the medical and dental needs that people have that they're requesting assistance from us for. A lot of dental care, dentures, sometimes some specific medical equipment that's needed. Those are all considered urgent requests. It still takes a little while for us to go through the application process, but we do make those decisions twice a month. And then all of the other requests that we have are considered general requests, and we review those monthly. So you should hear back with us for an urgent request within 4 weeks, and on a general request every 6 to 8 weeks. So the eligibility for our charitable program is that you do have to be a Missouri resident. That is different from our trusts who serve Missouri and the surrounding states. Our charitable program only serves those living in Missouri. You do have to have a disability that has been determined by Social Security. So you do have to be receiving disability benefits from Social Security to qualify for our charitable program. That is a little different if you have someone that is under 18. And if that happens, then you can just call our office and I can talk with you about that. We do base our guidelines in the federal poverty guidelines. So the household income has to be under those guidelines. And there's more information on what those current guidelines are on our website. And those generally change every year in January. You can't have a special needs trust or an ABLE account. So our charity is for those who don't have those other financial options like a special needs trust and ABLE account. We do require you to use those funds first, and then if it gets to the point that you've used all the funds in those accounts and you close them, then you can ask for assistance for our charitable program. And grants aren't guaranteed. So we do have tons and tons of people that qualify for our program, but as Casie mentioned, we are a private organization, so we do have limited funds, available, and it just unfortunately doesn't cover all of the need that's in our state. There is an application process to apply. The application can be found on the website. If you don't have access to the internet, just call and we are happy to mail you one. It's not a problem at all. With your application, we do need a copy of your SSI and or SSDI award letter. There's a lot of paperwork that Social Security sends. And so on the screen off to my right, is like a sample form of what a Social Security award letter looks like. So it does have, it's written in a letter form. Now it has a BNC number instead of your Social Security number, reference letters, and it just talks a little bit about the benefits that you're receiving. So something like this is what we're looking for. This is the information that we need to, one, make sure that you're receiving disability benefits, and two, to show what your monthly income is. We do require proof of all household income. It doesn't matter why the person's living in your home. We do require proof of that household income. That is different than some other programs. And then we require an estimate for what it is you're requesting the grant for. So if you need dental care, then we need a treatment plan from your dental office showing what it is that you're needing. It would need to show like what your insurance is covering and what part of it you would be required to pay. If your dental office offers a sliding scale fee, then it would need to have those amounts figured in as well. If you are needing some medical equipment, then we need an estimate from the durable medical equipment store that you're wanting to use, and it just shows us exactly what it is that you need and what the price is. Since we cover the entire state, prices fluctuate everywhere. And so this is your way, other than the application, this is your way of showing exactly what it is that you need, which store or business you're wanting to use, and then what the cost of that is. We don't contract with certain companies. We let you decide what dental office you want to go to. It's not up to us. We want you to use the, businesses that are in your town. And then if you were provided a grant, then we'll work with that business on getting that payment taken care of. So here is a small list, and it's definitely not exhaustive. There are just so many different types of needs that people have. So I don't want you to think that we can't help with anything not on this list. But we do have a lot of requests for dental care and dentures. That's definitely our two largest requests. You can look through here. We do help with hearing aids and eyeglasses, medical equipment modifications, orthotics, sometimes clothing. We do help pay for specialty camps, communication devices, special locks, just a wide variety of things. And so I mentioned that small list of things that we don't help with, and that list is on our website and on the application. And anything not on that list is something that we would consider helping with. So here's just a couple of examples of some grants that we've provided over the years. Tammy was 16 and she had a developmental disability. We purchased an iPad for her with a unique app that allows her to communicate. Tammy was using a communication device that was a lot older than even she was. So it's nice now that they have those iPad options with apps that can kind of grow with people as they change and develop. Scott was 33 and had a physical disability. His disability really affected his fine motor skills, and the lock that was on his home, he could not physically turn the lock to lock it or unlock it. He had to rely on his staff to come and either lock it so he was safe at night, or even unlock it to make it to where he was able to leave his home. Scott's disability didn't require him to have 24-hour staff, so if nobody was there and he left his home, he would just have to leave his home unlocked. So we were able to buy him a special lock that he was able to do himself, which provided so much independence for him. Fran was 75, and we helped provide a hearing aid for her that she couldn't afford and that her insurance didn't cover. And Anthony was 2. He had a developmental disability and really needed some sensory equipment. He was working with it at school, and it was really helpful and provided him a lot of support and comfort, but his family couldn't afford to have that at home. So we were able to purchase some sensory equipment that he could have at home as well.
That's it. So thank you. This is our contact information. We are located in Columbia. We do everything by phone, email, or fax. Feel free to give us a call if you have any questions about our special needs trust, our charitable program, or if you just want to talk through the difference between an ABLE account and a special needs trust. Again, my name is Casie Stevens.
Yeah, and I'm Heather, and it's important to know that we all have the same phone number, so that one number can get you to anyone in our office. We do have one more slide at the end that just does talk about the terminology that we use today. I know as you may go back through the PowerPoint, some things might not make sense, and so we wanted to add this terminology page at the end just to help you remember what a co-trustee is, what a beneficiary is, and what we're referring to whenever we're talking.
All right, well, thank you for attending today. It's always a pleasure to be able to work with Real Voices, Real Choices. And again, thank you. We hope that you learned something, and feel free to contact us.
Thanks.
Bye.